On my 33rd birthday, my wife told me not to touch her for an entire week. I had spent the previous year watching her pull farther and farther away from me, and that night, I finally told her our marriage was over. What I did not know was that 3 days later, she would hand me her phone and reveal something that completely changed the way I understood her behavior. My name is Porter, and for 5 years, I had believed Meredith was the woman I would grow old with. She was smart, funny, ambitious, and for a long time, she made me feel like I had somehow won at life. But sometime during the previous year, the woman I knew began disappearing right in front of me. At first, I blamed her demanding finance job. Then I started wondering if the real problem was me. Our relationship had once been warm and affectionate. We were close several times a week, talked about everything, laughed together, and actually looked forward to being alone. Then it slowly changed. Once a month became once every few months, and eventually 4 entire months passed without meaningful physical affection. I kept telling myself that marriage went through difficult seasons, but deep down, I was beginning to feel like my wife no longer wanted me. Instead of confronting her, I tried harder. I started handling most of the cooking, cleaning, dishes, errands, and little things around the house. I made her breakfast before work, prepared dinner at night, and rubbed her shoulders when she complained about sitting at a computer all day. I thought being patient and supportive would bring us closer again. Instead, I became terrified of asking for even the smallest sign of affection. A longer hug could earn an irritated sigh. A real kiss might be met with her pulling away. Whenever I tried to get close, she had another reason. She was exhausted, she had a headache, she needed sleep, or she had a terrible day. I started covering my disappointment with jokes because admitting the truth felt humiliating. I was beginning to believe that something about me had become unattractive, but I was too afraid to ask. Then came my birthday. I did not want a huge celebration or an expensive gift. More than anything, I wanted to feel remembered by the woman I loved. I took the afternoon off work, bought everything for her favorite shrimp risotto, picked up a bottle of wine she loved, and set the dining table with candles. I imagined that maybe, just for one evening, we could forget about work and remember why we had chosen each other. Meredith came home around 8 that night. She looked at the table, gave me a tired smile, and said it looked nice. Then I watched her expression change as she suddenly realized what day it was. She had forgotten my birthday. She apologized and blamed the chaos at work, and I did what I had become incredibly good at doing. I smiled, waved it away, and told her it did not matter as long as she was home. Dinner only made things worse. I tried talking about work, telling her something funny that had happened during my day, and asking about hers. Her answers barely contained more than a few words. Meanwhile, her phone kept lighting up beside her plate. She hardly touched the food I had spent hours preparing, and eventually she said she was exhausted and wanted to shower before bed. I cleaned the kitchen alone, still convincing myself that the night could somehow be saved. Later, I walked into the bedroom and found her already under the covers with her back toward me. The room was dark except for the lamp beside the bed, and she was still staring at her phone. I quietly climbed in, wrapped an arm around her waist, and kissed her shoulder. Her entire body stiffened. She put the phone down, turned toward me, and told me there would be no intimacy that night and that I should not even try anything for the rest of the week. There was no birthday wish. No apology for the past year. Not even a gentle request for space. It sounded like an order given to someone who had become an inconvenience. I stared at her for several seconds, and for the first time in months, I stopped trying to make excuses for her. I realized I was not angry because she did not want sex. I was angry because I had spent an entire year disappearing inside my own marriage. I sat up and calmly told her that our marriage was over. Meredith laughed and accused me of being dramatic because she was simply not in the mood. I told her that I was tired of being treated like a household appliance that cooked, cleaned, waited, and never complained. I would call a lawyer in the morning. Then I took a pillow and blanket, walked into the guest room, and locked the door behind me. At first, she was angry. She knocked lightly, then started shouting that I was being ridiculous and that nobody ended a 5-year marriage over one bad night. I stayed silent. Hours passed. Eventually, her messages started appearing on my phone. First came anger and accusations. Then, sometime after 4 in the morning, the tone changed completely. Her messages became desperate apologies. She admitted that what she had said was cruel and begged me to talk to her. Then I heard her crying outside the door. I wanted to open it. Every part of me wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her everything was fine. But I knew that if I immediately forgave her without demanding any real change, we would return to exactly the same marriage I had been suffering through. So I stayed inside that room until morning, wondering whether I had finally protected my dignity or destroyed the relationship I had spent 5 years building. When I stepped out around 6, Meredith was sitting on the hallway floor with swollen eyes and yesterday's makeup still on her face. She looked exhausted. We went to the kitchen, where the untouched birthday wine was still sitting beside the dirty dishes. She began explaining how badly work had been affecting her and how completely drained she felt every day. I listened until she finished, then told her something she had apparently never understood. This was not about one night. I told her that for a year, I had been slowly breaking under the weight of rejection. I had cooked, cleaned, adjusted my schedule, tried to make her laugh, and accepted every excuse because I thought that was what a loving husband was supposed to do. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like her husband and started feeling like a convenient roommate. I told her I needed space, packed a bag, and went to stay with my brother Grady. For 3 days, I barely slept. I tried working, but my mind kept replaying that bedroom conversation. By Friday, I needed to return home for clothes, documents, and my laptop charger. I warned Meredith that I would come at 6. When I arrived, she was sitting alone in the living room, looking completely different from the woman I had left behind. She stood up slowly and asked me to give her 5 minutes. Then she walked to the dining table, picked up her phone, unlocked it, and held it toward me. My first thought was the one I had been trying not to think for an entire year. Another man. I imagined messages, secrets, explanations, and finally discovering that my worst fears had been true. Meredith told me to open the messaging app at the top. My hands were sweating as I tapped it. But the first conversation was not with a man. It was not with a coworker. It was with a therapist named Dr. Monica. What I read on that phone changed everything. Meredith had been dealing with severe depression and anxiety for more than a year, triggered by the pressure at her company and a workload that had become impossible to manage. She had not stopped loving me. She had stopped feeling like herself. In her messages to Dr. Monica, she admitted that every time I tried to care for her, she felt more guilty, because she believed she was failing me. One message hit me harder than anything else. Meredith had written that she felt like she was destroying me. She described watching me cook, clean, and try to make her laugh while she could barely force herself to feel anything. She said intimacy made her panic, because she knew she could not give me the affection I wanted, and instead of admitting how broken she felt, she pushed me away because she was terrified I would eventually pity her. Then I found the message she had written the morning after my birthday. She told Dr. Monica that she had forgotten my birthday because she had spent part of the day having an anxiety attack in a bathroom at work. When she came home and saw the dinner I had prepared, she panicked, because she knew I deserved love she could not emotionally give. She admitted that what she said to me in bed had been cruel, but at that moment, she had been reacting from fear rather than thinking clearly. I lowered the phone and looked at Meredith. She was sitting on the couch with her face buried in her hands, crying so hard that her whole body was shaking. There was no other man. No secret affair. No hidden relationship. The betrayal I thought I had discovered was actually a woman quietly falling apart while pretending she was fine. And somehow, that truth hurt in a completely different way. I sat down across from her and told her I was sorry. I told her I had no idea how serious things had become, and I wished she had trusted me enough to tell me. She cried and said she was ashamed. She believed I already did everything for our marriage, and admitting that she was depressed would make her look weak or broken in my eyes. She thought hiding it was protecting me, when in reality, it had left both of us drowning in the dark. I told her I understood why she had been suffering, but I needed her to understand something too. Her depression explained her behavior, but it did not erase what that behavior had done to me. For an entire year, I had wondered whether I was ugly, undesirable, or somehow no longer worthy of being loved by my own wife. I had been emotionally crushed while pretending to be the patient husband who could handle anything. I told her the marriage we had before that birthday was over. I was not going back to the version where I cooked, cleaned, smiled, accepted rejection, and pretended nothing was wrong. But I also told her that I still loved her. If she was finally willing to be honest and get the help she needed, I was not going to abandon her in the middle of her illness. I simply could not save her by destroying myself. We agreed on strict boundaries. Meredith would continue treatment with Dr. Monica, and we would begin couples therapy. I would stay in the guest room for the time being, because neither of us was ready to pretend everything was normal. Most importantly, we agreed that silence could no longer be our way of dealing with pain. If Meredith was struggling, she had to tell me. If I felt rejected or hurt, I had to speak instead of hiding behind jokes. That night, there was no dramatic reconciliation. We did not suddenly climb into the same bed and promise that everything would be perfect. I slept alone in the guest room. But for the first time in days, I actually slept. The situation was still painful, and I had no idea whether our marriage would survive, but at least I finally knew what we were fighting against. 3 months later, I can say that we are still together. The first 6 weeks were extremely difficult. Living in the same house while sleeping in separate rooms created an awkward silence that sometimes felt unbearable. We started couples therapy with a specialist named Dr. James, and those sessions forced both of us to confront things we had avoided for years. Meredith finally learned how to talk about her depression, while I learned that constantly pretending to be fine had also helped hide the seriousness of my own pain. Meredith eventually made another major decision. She left the corporate finance job that had pushed her to the edge and accepted a position with another company that offered fewer hours and a healthier environment. Her treatment also began helping. Slowly, she started enjoying small things again. She took walks, read books, spent time outside, and began looking like the woman I remembered instead of someone who was simply surviving every day. Our marriage did not magically return to normal. In fact, we deliberately chose not to return to the old version of it. We continued sleeping separately for a while and started dating each other again. Twice a week, we went somewhere together without our phones. We did not discuss work or household problems during those dates. We simply talked, laughed, ate, watched movies, and tried to remember who we were before we became a sick wife and an exhausted husband. Even our physical relationship began returning slowly. There was no pressure and no expectation. We focused on trust first. One evening, Meredith came home after a terrible day at her new job. In the past, she would have disappeared into her phone and pushed me away if I approached. Instead, she came into the kitchen, hugged me, and told me she was completely drained and did not have the energy for intimacy. Then she asked if I would simply sit beside her and hold her hand. That moment meant more to me than anything physical could have. She was finally telling me the truth instead of making me guess. I no longer felt rejected, because she was not rejecting me. She was trusting me enough to tell me what she needed. And for the first time in a very long time, I did not feel like an unwanted husband. I felt like her partner. Looking back, I still hate what happened on my 33rd birthday. It was one of the most painful nights of my life. But it also forced us to stop living inside a marriage built on silence, fear, guilt, and pretending. Setting that boundary did not mean I stopped loving Meredith. It meant I finally understood that loving someone should never require completely losing yourself. We are not magically fixed, and I do not know exactly what the future will look like. But we are communicating now. We are getting professional help. We are rebuilding trust one ordinary day at a time. And if I learned anything from that terrible birthday, it is this: sometimes the person hurting you is fighting a battle you cannot see, but understanding their pain does not mean you have to ignore your own. We almost lost each other because we were both suffering in silence. Now, at least, we are facing the storm together. If this one hit close to home, drop a comment and subscribe for more.